Many Honduran politicians admit openly that America's continued policy of strengthening the army for external reasons is threatening the new fragile internal democracy in Honduras. A few plane hijackings, the kidnapping of businessmen, and bombs. Honduras is still a country of relative peace, despite being surrounded by violence. Yet, beneath the obvious tranquility, there are ominous signs that this country too is beginning to fall victim to the bloodletting which dominates neighboring Guatemala and El Salvador, and which characterized the revolution in neighboring Nicaragua. With the exception of Haiti, Honduras is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. 48% of her people are illiterate, 10% of her babies die before the age of 1. Wars on her borders have sent 300,000 refugees in waves across her frontiers in search of homes and food she can ill afford. But the threats to Honduras are as much from problems inside the country as they are from the upheavals outside. A superficial peace reigns over the age-old battleground of the banana plantations. Gone are the days when American banana barons owned and exploited more than 1 million acres of the country's dominant produce, yet the stranglehold of the US multinational fruit companies over the Honduran economy remains as tight as ever. These women working at this banana packing factory are still directly employed by the United Brands Fruit Company of New York. Though their wages and conditions have improved, the profits from their still cheap labor leave Honduras as fast as they're made. For 30 years, as a result of land invasions by the peasants, holdings by the multinationals have been gradually diminished, even though the fruit companies have frequently managed to bribe the army to come in and drive these people off. Gradually, as on this sugar plantation, legalized peasant cooperatives have been formed. Farming this crop is an attempt to escape the bondage of banana growing, only to find that sugar refining too is in the hands of one of the multinationals, in this case the Standard Fruit Company of America. Living conditions for cooperative workers are not much better than they were before, but the desire to run the business themselves is at least satisfied. The men who administer the cooperative feel greatest resentment over Standard Fruit's refusal to negotiate the price paid for their sugar. With financial difficulties at home, the company has actually reduced the money it pays for the sugar here, whilst the profit margin remains the same. Palm oil production is dogged by the same problem. The fruit that is cut here is the property of another cooperative, owned by the 2,000 people who work here. In contrast to the sugar or banana workers, they actually own the factory that undertakes the first stage of extracting the oil. But the money is made at the next stage and in marketing. All that is in the hands of United Brands. In the banana town of La Lima, there is no signboard advertising United Brands' presence above its office complex. Such is the delicate climate in which the multinationals continue their business here. Company tennis courts are provided for company executives, and gradually, whilst not releasing the marketing controls or the profits, the companies are beginning to hire Honduran executives, whilst still paying backhanders to ensure the old acquiescence to their trading needs from the authorities. In the banana suburbs, life is still poor, but because there have been changes, because the unions are strong and recognized, and because of the cooperatives, talk of armed rebellion, such as has occurred in all Honduras's neighbors, is still rare. In the Honduran capital of Tegucigalpa, though, soldiers guard the banks. Leftist slogans mark a few walls, and over the months, a small band of Honduran guerrillas, the Chinchineros, have launched mainly anti-American attacks. A few plane hijackings and the kidnapping of businessmen and bombs. One, for example, last month here at the headquarters of IBM, in which the British three-man embassy has the misfortune to be housed. Officials at the United States Embassy blame Honduras's internal tensions almost exclusively upon neighboring Nicaragua. State Department officials admit openly that it is American policy to destabilize the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. Reagan administration officials have admitted that $19 million has been set aside for the task. But the US ambassador here, John Negroponte, consistently refuses to comment on the charge made this month by America's Newsweek magazine that he is running a secret war against Nicaragua.
Well, again, as I said, I prefer not to comment on stories to this effect, but I would point out that since the Sandinista revolution succeeded in July of 1979, that the level of violence in El Salvador increased dramatically, and I think there's every reason to suppose that the revolutionary violence in Salvador has been supported directly from Nicaragua, and there has even been an increase in externally supported terrorism here in Honduras itself.
Across the road from the ambassador's embassy, a Honduran soldier guards the US Information Center. It's here that leading Hondurans and a number of reliable American sources charge that some 50 CIA agents are masterminding a covert attempt to overthrow the Nicaraguan government. Hatched in the seedier parts of town, the plan has centered on disaffected National Guardsmen who once served in the notorious forces of Nicaragua's former President Somoza. Some have trained openly in Miami. Others who frequent Tegucigalpa's drinking parlors are untrained but heavily armed. The quiet border town of Danlí is a main supply point, and the Honduran army appears happy to allow them to operate quite freely and in some cases to provision them. They travel the border road in well-maintained Toyota trucks. Such are the vast distances of this frontier, neatly dotted with its little border markers, that it is very hard to track them. Indeed, many of their known camps now lie abandoned, a few twigs left behind from makeshift shelters. But in the past month there have been a climax of cross-border incidents by these Sandinista. Back in Danlí, refugees from the attacks sit forlornly outside the Masonic Hall, oblivious of the game that is being acted out at their expense. Inside, more of the refugeed men from Nicaragua who are regularly approached with good money to join the cause. Further north along the same border, the soggy cluster of makeshift huts that mark the 12,000-strong refugee encampment at Mocaron. Here, the Mesquite Indians have gathered, having fled Nicaragua. They have come partly because, in their ethnic minority, they resented the Sandinistas' attempt to drag them into their concept of the 20th century, but partly because of an American-financed propaganda campaign launched by dissident Mesquite leaders on American-provided radio transmitters beamed into Nicaragua. Even at the apparently sleepy border post at Las Trojes, there are signs that the attempt to destabilize northern Nicaragua has begun to go very wrong. As one Honduran rancher complained, the Sandinistas have responded by mobilizing their forces on the other side of the border.
They've been increasing troops along the border.
From around what to what?
From around 60 to 80 guys on the patrol.
And in the old days there used to be...
It used to be only 3 to 5 guys.
Do you think there is a lot more tension in the area now?
There is more tension in the area now, so we are very worried because we are expecting something like attack or invasion against us.
The Honduran army has responded by sending out more of its patrols, and a real risk of war between the two countries who've never fought before now exists. A far more open military campaign is being conducted on Honduras's other border with El Salvador. Some of the country's 28 US-supplied helicopters are now deployed along with 2,000 Honduran troops in an attempt to prevent Salvadorian guerrillas crossing into Honduras away from the Salvadorian army's current offensive. The Honduran colonel and his opposite number in El Salvador don't communicate with each other. All intelligence is passed to each side by the Americans. There is some disappointment in American circles that the Hondurans on this border don't take their task more seriously. Their appetite for getting involved in chasing Salvadoran guerrillas is not great. Their binoculars as often as not are trained on the wildlife rather than on events across the valley. The captain here admitted they were here in part because the Americans wanted them to be. Having increased military aid here by 300% in 3 years, the Americans are in a position to ask. Back in Tegucigalpa, the tensions of the war appear far distant, but many Honduran politicians admit openly that America's continued policy of strengthening the army for external reasons is threatening the new fragile internal democracy in Honduras.